Hello, 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 everybody. Hope you guys can hear me. It's our first live stream. It's me and Craig here. We're just going to shoot the breeze, man. So, welcome. And I'll type a little message in. Welcome, everybody. Anyways.
All right.
You know, we have 3 viewers already. Oh, cool. Who's viewing us? There's somebody actually watching. There's 6 viewers. Yay.
US banter. All right.
Excellent. So how are you doing today anyways?
I'm doing much better. I've been sick for, well, almost a month now, and I've had like 3 different illnesses, and this last week I've been recovering from some other thing that was just related to stomach, but all is good now. The weather is like thawing out here in St. Petersburg, so.
Is it still cold down there?
It's cold, but the river is no longer a sheet of ice, so there's boats starting to flow in and out, so.
Gotcha.
Much better.
We've had kind of hot weather this weekend. I was down at the beach earlier, so, just soaking it up because I need to top up my tan.
Right? You know you're desperate when you're running to the beach and it's fucking cold. Excuse my English. It's like you go in. Right?
It's been like 20 degrees centigrade down here for like yesterday. I think it was like 25 or 27 or something. It was crazy. We weren't expecting the weather, but hey, it's welcome. We don't mind. We don't mind.
That Brighton is probably not that different from like Southern California. Well, I mean not Southern California, like Northern California, like say Pacifica. Like,
right.
You got a beach. There's water. There's even a little bit of sand.
Right.
But that water can be pretty cold.
Just an itty bitty bit. I'm not going to dip my feet in. Obviously, that's going to be crazy making.
I guess since the guitar world of, I guess the 3 people that follow us, maybe they probably.
Hey, 6 people, dude.
they probably know that the new Dokken Live DVD and whatnot, that package came out.
Right.
Was it this week?
Right. Yes.
So I have to admit that I haven't seen it. I've been watching people talk about it. Well, now I've seen
it. And you were there, right?
Yeah. So interesting kind of occurrence was that I had been just back and forth with George. So what had happened was we were trying to get the OG prototype guitar done prior to those shows. So I was one of those insiders that actually knew all the details of the reunion stuff before it ever happened, just because I heard all the stuff that was going on to prepare for it.
Right.
And then, with the pending concerts and video shoots that were going on, George and I had already been talking about doing the OG Bones guitars, and so I had it in my head that I thought it would be really cool and beneficial to the project if he would actually have one when he started those shows.
Right.
So we busted one out pretty fast. I had I'd been working on that body that went to the prototype for a while, and the funny thing is I painted it twice. I painted it once, and I went to LA, and I actually took it and held it next to the original guitar, and I was like, it was one of those moments where you're like, okay, according to everything I know, it was going to be cool, but I got it next to the original, and it wasn't exact for me. It wasn't
right.
Colors were off. There were a couple things that didn't look right, so I took a lot of like photos of them together, and then I went back and I started painting it, and I repainted it. And the second time it came out, it looked, well, much more like the original. And so we cobbled that thing together so fast. It was just, we didn't even have time to scallop the frets on the neck of the guitar. It was like assemble.
So it was just a straight neck. It was the upper frets weren't scalloped on that one?
No.
Right.
And even more interesting is so I was doing all the headstock logos because I saw the original. I knew how the nuances of it and all that kind of stuff. So I was doing all those myself, and I didn't have time to do it. So I had John Gadesi. He did them, and he had the old block ESP logo with the drop shadow. He had
okay, cool.
Hanging around in his because I guess he had worked on a lot of ESP guitars, and so he had that one there. So the way he did it, he just used the block ESP logo, and then kind of stressed the J Frog logo on it. Anyway, it came out okay. It's just a different anomaly. It's just a little bit different.
Right. But it looked great on the video. I mean, you know, it's the thing about the video, and guys, if you've seen it, and just gonna say quick hello to EVH Gear TV, Eric. Hey, what's up, man? JJ's House of Jams. Hey, man. Jordy, thank you for joining us. Lisa, Jeff. Hi, guys. How you doing? Oh,
I
sorry
hope
about the
I
kids.
didn't bore you guys too much.
No, we won't.
We'll try not to.
All we're going to do is we're going to chat about kind of George stuff. No, we're kidding. Right the way through. And we have some other cool people here. Tyrone's here. Hey, man, how you doing? I'm going to be doing a live stream with him tomorrow as well. But anyway, that's on Facebook. That's a different thing. Mr. B Jr. Hey, man, how you doing? I don't know who that is, but type your name. I want to know your name, dude. And Charles as well. Hey, guys. All right, anyways. It looked great on here, and you know, the DVD kind of, you know, it really gave the vibe of Dokken. And initially, when I put it up, I put it into the DVD player. I was watching it last night. I literally kind of, Bindy and I got home, and this had been dropped through the letterbox, and I basically just tore it open, came downstairs, put it in the DVD player. I'm watching it, and she came down, and I'm jumping around like a little kid because it's like, this is Dokken, man. This is the original lineup, and it gave the vibe. And obviously the last 4 songs from Kiss of Death, Kiss of Death, The Hunter, Dream Warriors, and In My Dreams, they didn't have enough footage to actually kind of, you know, do a proper video edit of that. So kind of, you know, it's a little bit funky, let's say. But it really gave the impression. Oh, hey, Bruce. I know your name now. Cool. Anyways, it really gave the impression of being at the show in terms of just that vibe. And, you know, they have a little bit of magic. They you know, the original 4, they just have this chemistry between them. And the guitar just kind of topped it off. When George was playing that, it was like, you know, that was harking back to Beast from the East, which was the first album I bought, you know, so that was cool.
They should have got a hold of me because I had really good footage of Kiss of Death at the Divers Tokyo show.
Right.
Yeah, I actually flew overnight to Japan in October. Because their shows were in October. I think it was in 2016. And so for whatever reason, I just got the wild hair. I wanted to go check out the OG prototype, hang out with George, and I just bought a plane ticket and just decided to take a couple days off and flew to Japan. So I flew there, got there the day of the show at Diver City. By the way, this is a flyer that I picked up when I was at that show.
Oh, cool.
The bottom thing has Diver City. City. So anyway, I went there, hung out with George. When I first got there, I actually didn't have, like, George was busy. I guess he was using a different SIM card. I couldn't reach him, whatever. So what I ended up doing was I ended up getting this VIP laminate. You can see it all the way there, and got into the show. And I saw George. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, get down, man." And he goes, "Well, why? Hold on a minute." So he tells me, "Hold on," and then he runs backstage and he comes back out and he gives me this lovely all access laminate and
Cool.
says, come on up on, let's take a couple photos. We took a photo, which I think I put it on Facebook, of he and I on the stage at Diver City with the OG prototype. And then we hung out backstage. They were having the catering crew and all that stuff there. And so I went back and hung out with the band and met Nick. And Nick was back there playing acoustic guitar and just jamming out in the back room. And then Jeff Pilson comes in and we start chatting about Foreigner and about talking and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, I went to go grab a bite to eat, and Don was there. He was hanging.
Now, I have a question. Did he have the sunglasses on when he came in?
I don't remember if he had sunglasses, but he was very nice. He was very polite and courteous, and he's like, he's like pointing all the things on. It was like one of those buffet lines, He's like,
right.
Don't eat that. Don't eat that. That's terrible. Try that. That's good. That's good. He's like pointing at me like, yeah, don't even bother with that. Eat that. That's really good. That's really good. And he's like telling me on the catering thing what I should eat. So, we shook hands and, he asked me who it was. I said I was here. George is. So we chatted for a couple minutes, and then I went back into the room and hung out with Nick, and Jeff, and George for a bit. And then when the show started, I went out because I wanted to get some really good footage. I went out to front stage and had a really good shot. And George and I had talked about that, and we talked about that he should probably open the show so I could get some footage with the Bones guitar. So
right.
He played Kiss of Death. He opened the show with Kiss of Death. He played it on the prototype, Bones. And it was amazing. I mean, he was on fire. I mean, he came out of there. It's probably some of the best. And I posted this footage. So if you see the Kiss of Death solo that I posted of George playing on the OG guitar, that was from the Diver City show. And he was freaking on fire, man. That was one of the best, versions of the Kiss of Death live. Right. Played in a long time, and the whole song, he was just on fire. So when I say he managed to use that footage, they probably
that would have helped actually if I'd seen that footage on the actual DVD, because that was one of the songs where they kind of just mixed it together and just created something which was a visual to the music. The only problem was when the solo comes in, as a guitar player, you can tell, they use different audio to different video. But,
yeah, there used to be a lot of videos like that in the 80s.
Right.
Like when I was a young guitar player, I'm sure all of us did this, right? All you had back when I was, in my teens was MTV. You didn't have all these instructional DVDs and live concert DVDs. No, you had the music. You had the authorized, music video for that song, and that playing on MTV, and you had to wait for it to show up on MTV.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this one time actually. It was I had asked my sister to record one of the rock shows, and this is the time of VHS cassette tapes, So I was out that evening or something or whatever, and I'd left it to kind of record the stuff for me. So I'm watching it back, and she'd stopped it 2 minutes before the show or whatever. And the last song was Tangled in the Web, and I'm watching it, and it ended, and I was like, no.
No, yeah.
We didn't have YouTube at the time, so I couldn't just go and watch it afterwards, and see the whole thing. So.
No, I mean, and this is the thing that I was doing is I would be hoping that the guitar player of, quote unquote, whatever band it was right. going to play the solo during the music video, but right. always played something else, like especially George. And so you would be, okay, now I'm going to learn that riff. And you go down there, and then they're playing something. It's not even in sync with the music, and it's just them kind of, you know, posing with their guitar, and you're just like, ah, shit.
You know, he did that on purpose. Like, he used to wrap the tube screamer up in like tape so no one could see the settings, right?
Yeah, well,
otherwise someone might learn the stuff, and then I come along like 20 years later to show everyone exactly how to do it.
Now people know how to play his Lynch stuff, but back
right.
The only thing we had was the terrible, you know, poser videos, and then if we're lucky, you know, you mail away, or you know, order do you remember the tab that was on the cassette where you listen to the numbers?
Yeah, of course.
They tell you to write the numbers down, so you get the little tab book, and then you're playing the audio cassette. It's like, you know, B string, you know, 16, you know, G 14, and you're like writing all these numbers down. It takes like 20 hours to write the tab down. And then by that time, you just even want to freaking play the song anymore. You're like, oh,
right. But you know, it was such a fun time to learn, because we had to figure it out for ourselves, right? A lot of it was kind of just, you had to use your ears, you had to use your instincts and figure out how the music was, because there wasn't so much tab. It wasn't like, you know, we couldn't go into Google and find a Guitar Pro tab for it, which is going to play back in Guitar Pro and stuff. It literally was, you know, listen to it, see if it sounds right when you play it, if you can figure out the notes, and then, you know, and if you got tab, and, you know, I used to buy the guitar magazines. It was a guitar for the practicing musician and Guitar World, you know, and it was always fingers crossed there was some tab in there so that you could kind of, you know, follow it along and then play the song. And it only came along once in a while. It wasn't instantaneous. So yeah, fun times, man.
Somewhere in a box back in the United States, I have Guitar for the Practicing Musician, like, issues from, I think, from 1986 all the way through 1992. I think I have like almost every issue from that period in a box somewhere. And and my excuse was, one day I'm going to go back and learn that song, so I can't throw the magazine away. So, and I hauled those magazines around for my entire adult life, like from the time I was a teenager, every move. So I still have those magazines, and I still haven't learned. But I will tell a story that I think is interesting, right? So you talk about how we had to learn everything by ear, right?
Right.
And so, you know, back in like the 80s, you know, when you're trying to learn something like Yngwie Malmsteen, right? Because I was really big into Yngwie back in that time. You know, I was trying to learn stuff off of the Rising Force album.
Right.
You know, I can, the chords and stuff, it's not a problem, but all the leads, you know, it's just, it's so fast. Like, a lot of stuff's really fast, and, you know, it doesn't always come out clear. So I was like trying to figure out how I could learn that, you know, when it was that fast. So I had this, the Radio Shack, it was a electronics store in the United States.
Right.
And they used to sell these, they were tape recorders. They were kind of like flat black, and they had a red record button on, and you fed the tape in from the top. And the thing I did back then was I had this mind, because I was an inquisitive child. I used to take things apart and everything else and try to put them back together again, because I wanted to know how everything worked. So I took this tape recorder apart, and it had a belt drive. So it had a little, it was like a spool, and then a rubber band type belt drive that went around it that ran the tape mechanism. So I had this in my mind that if I could change the size of the spool, like on a bicycle, I could adjust the ratio of how it recorded. So I ended up wrapping the spool and then putting the rubber band back on, so that when I pushed the record button, it would record it at a different speed. So it would actually, so when I would put it into a normal tape recorder, it would play it slow.
Right.
Slow.
Right.
So I kept rapping it until I got it to be an octave.
Oh, cool. Right.
I got it to the point where I had the speed exactly to where it was an octave recording.
So it's like half speed, essentially.
I made a speed training thing back. This was like when I was in the early teens, and I had to learn Malmsteen. So I used my Radio Shack tape recorder, and I changed that ratio just enough to learn that stuff. So I put it in, and I could just learn. It'd be like, but you mean you could feel like you really listen hard, you could hear the notes, and that's how I learned Malmsteen.
I can totally relate to that because my sister had this tape deck. It was like a double tape deck, and I did two things with it. So I'll tell you a little story about that. The first thing that it had was it had a speed control on it, so I could half speed everything, right? Which meant that just like it's an octave below. So then you could kind of listen back. Yeah, it sounded like it was a little bit underwater, and we were using cassette tapes back then, so resolution wasn't exactly, pristine. It wasn't as high definition as like a CD or a digital kind of file or anything like that. But it actually allowed me to kind of half speed it and figure some stuff out, and at least hear it at that half speed, so that I could kind of get close, and then you use your intuition and a little bit of tab and know-how from other songs and stuff, and you could get it. The other thing that it allowed me to do was, because it was a double tape deck, I eventually figured out a way where I could use it as a recorder, as in a studio recorder, a multi-track recorder. What I used to do is have like one tape, and I'd record the first track onto the first tape. Then I would put that tape into the first deck, put the second tape into the second deck, and I had like I think an amp sim or something, a very early amp sim. It was my Yamaha FX550 processor, which I still have actually. And I used to plug that in to get my sound. So while the first tape was recording onto the second tape, I would do the overdubs. And then I'd do it again. And by the third or fourth time, the quality was just, it was completely kind of demolished. But it actually allowed me to get into multi-track recording in a really simplistic way. And it literally was kind of, just DIY, kind of guerrilla style. Do it just for the sake of doing it kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at the technology today, I think, wow, I mean, it'd be so cool to have it. But then I'm glad that I had to go through all of that back then, because there's things that happen, I don't know how to, that effort that you put in, it comes back out. I mean, I find that the more effort I put into something, the more at the end I eventually get out of it. So if I just, for example, learn some riff really fast, try to look at some tab, and then listen to the song, and check it to see if it's right. If I learn that way, it's not the same as if I just forego like trying to look at the mind of someone else's interpretation, and I just listen with my ear and play it my way. People see me play like Jason Becker stuff and Tony McAlpine stuff and all that. I mean, when I play that stuff, I mean, in some cases, I try to understand how they played certain things, like with Becker's arpeggios. I try to get some of the nuances with the slides and stuff. But like for the most part, it's much easier for me if I learn those songs my way, the way I finger a scale, the way I finger an arpeggio. Like I try to do it that way, and when I do it that way, number one, it sits in my mind better, right? And number two, I can execute it much better because my muscle memory knows how those moves work. And so pretty much, if I would recommend to anybody that's learning songs or learning to play the guitar, I think that you should definitely put that time and effort into not just reading tab, but like if you've got enough guitar skills under your belt, try to learn it with your style, the way you play, but just make it sound the same. Like use your ear to make it sound like you hear it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to come out with a better result, and you're going to play it better.
Right. And it feels much better, like you said, as well, because when you have a natural style under your fingers, then you're not having to kind of rethink the technical aspect of playing. Your fingers already know how to do it. You're just kind of creating the vibe and doing the phrasing and playing the notes.
Yeah.
So a lot of that. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, somebody asked me once, like maybe a year, I don't remember how long ago it was, but I posted a cover of McAlpine's Time in the Test off of Maximum Security. And somebody asked me, they go, so how did you learn all those notes? Or how did you learn that song? You know?
Right.
And what I explained is that, so first of all, I learned the main riffs, right? I learned the main melodies, like how the melodies are going. And then a lot of the runs, those fast scalar runs, I know what key he's in. So what I do is I play what I would play.
Right.
So I fill whatever those bars are from. I know where the note he starts on, and I know the note he ends on, and I know what key he's in. So I just play what Craig would play during those bars, making sure that I start on the right note and I end on the right note. And for the most part, it fits. As long as my timing is good, it fits in. And as long as I come back and I play those main melodies and those main arpeggio sections and things like that, it sounds correct.
And doing it that way also kind of injects your own personality into playing, right? So kind of a lot of the time when when I used to learn the George stuff, the stuff for Lynch licks, you know, I'd be learning it to try and show people how it was played by George, but I know sometimes the fingering was my own because that's what worked for me. And when I actually create solos, that's exactly what I do. You know, I'm not thinking necessarily about, you know, I have to play it in this way because I'm trying to get this vibe by this guitar player. It's what works for my fingers, you know, and it as same way. If the timing's right, if the delivery's correct and stuff, and you know you're actually injecting everything that you have into it, then hey, you know, it's going to create something cool. It's going to create a, you know, your own thing. It stamps your own signature into it as well.
Yeah, I think it's the way. I mean, I really think it's more beneficial than when I was younger. I tried to learn every single thing, note for note, exactly how what I heard on the record.
I never did that, by the way, especially with George's stuff. I've never actually learned anything.
I tried. Like, I posted that. I don't know if you heard it, but I reposted So Many Tears. I played the solo for So Many Tears.
Right. Gotcha.
And you know, the first time I tried to learn stuff off Back for the Attack, you know, I listened to it, and you know, first of all, notwithstanding the fact that there's wicked vibrato and all that kind of stuff, and that's like the key, like that you know, vibe that George has when he plays. But damn, that dude, like, he's so chaotic in his technique, the way he plays. It sounds brilliant, but it's like almost not recreatable.
Right.
It's just like this maniacal noodling thing that happens in there, and it's not bad. It's just
it's difficult to understand. I guess from that perspective, it's kind of getting into the mindset, which was what you were speaking about earlier, right? Getting into that vibe and that mindset is actually, it's quite a journey. You know, I literally kind of wanted to learn Lynch stuff for 10 years, and that's pretty much all my focus was. You know, I was learning other stuff, but it was that desire to actually kind of, you know, to get into that mindset, which actually helped me to get to where I was with his soloing. And you're right, it's kind of, it's not linear in the way that I heard a lot of other players where there would be repetitive licks and phrases within solos. which actually made it relatively straightforward to kind of either play them or kind of recreate them. But with George, it was a constant flow. It was kind of, you know, it just, one lick leads to another lick, which leads to another lick, and then you might have something which was repeating, like on, you know, in my dreams, where you have the, you know, the fast single-handed hammer-on pull-off thing. But then it just goes into another run, and that's what really impressed me about his playing as well. It was just that the way he actually approached it was, I thought it was just very different from everyone else. Yeah.
You know, I mean, for sure, I think that you definitely got the vibe of George playing. I'll say this, you know, when I was younger, there was a period of time where I was a fan of George, you know, younger, listening to the doc and stuff, and then I kind of got really into the shrapnel thing, and I kind of left George behind. I didn't really care about that as much, and I still appreciated it, but for me, I wanted to go in a different place, you know. But notwithstanding that, you know, I understood that there was, you know, genius in the chaos, and it took, I would say, there was a time much later, after I had already became friends with George, where I was sitting in his house, in his little you know, studio, and we were working on some songs for some video game project that I was, you know, working on, that I was coming up with. And so I had brought some riffs in, and George and I were sitting in his garage, and we were writing some stuff. Basically, George was trying to turn my crap into something cool, kind of like that. So I had George there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm working, you know, I'm basically working the, what do you call it? I want to say it was Pro Tools, but I don't remember exactly.
Right, just the DAW you were recording to, right? Yeah,
it was some DAW. I don't remember which one it was. And I'm doing all the stuff and cutting and pasting and setting up and recording him. And there was a period of time, you know, there was this thing he started doing, and I just turned around. I stopped in my tracks and just turned around and just watched what he was doing. I'm just like sitting there, you know, here I am, you know, Mr., you know, shreddy, shrapnel guy, whatever. And I turn around and I'm just looking at George, and I'm like, wow, I just literally just was sitting there in amazement that what he was doing, it's just a combination of several factors, right? Number one, it was, like I was saying, the genius and the chaos was one thing, right? But then it was the command and the confidence that he has in the way he plays and his notes. And when he hits a note, and this is something that I would say to anyone, right? That you want to be a better guitar player. You want to be a better guitar player, make every note count. Like, put confidence in your playing, put confidence in your notes. When you're doing a vibrato or, you know, landing on a note, don't just land on the note because it's the right note to land on. Land on the note and beat the fucking shit out of it, you know?
Right.
George, when he plays the guitar, he manhandles it. And like I was saying, when I was watching this, I was just like, you know, I was in awe. I've seen George play live before, you know, I've heard him on records and all this crap. But that day when I was sitting there working with him, and then I just saw him just break loose on some genius stuff, that day my respect level for him just skyrocketed to the roof. Don't let it fool you, right? Don't, like I say, all people out there that go, okay, well, George is just, you know, he's just winging it, and he's like this very specialized guy. No, George is freaking cool. I mean, and you know that even more when you're sitting there next to him while he's doing his creative work.
Right.
It really is. I
kind of had a similar experience last November, December when they played here, because, you know, I sat with him for an hour and we played guitar and stuff, and he started off playing his Les Paul, and then he, you know, I asked him whether he wanted to try my guitar, which was my ESP Spirit Dance, which is up there. Anyways, we switched over guitars, and it was just fascinating just watching him play, because like you said, it's the command and the confidence, but also, you know, there were no wrong notes, because he had such an understanding of how to actually manipulate outside notes and make them work. Everything worked, and the flow of playing was just fascinating. I know most people don't get to see this, because when he's touring and stuff, he's obviously playing Dokken songs, Lynch Mob, XM, or whatever, you know, tour he's on. So it's very kind of geared towards that. But left to his own devices, when you see that aspect coming out, that fusion player, it's just phenomenal. It really kind of, I sat there and kind of, you know, just picking up little bits and pieces for that hour, just watching his fingers and just seeing how confident he was with it. And with every single note, he made it an event. That was fantastic, you know. And it's something that I try and do with my playing now. You know, every single note has to count. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a simple solo, a complicated solo, but when you land on that note, it has to have impact, because then it really has an effect on the listener. And I guess that's our ultimate aim, you know. We want to speak with the guitars. That's our instrument. It's, you know, I can sing, but not very well, right? But my voice is my guitar. I want that to actually convey what my emotions are. And that's what I teach. When I actually teach people to play lead guitar and stuff, I'm constantly saying to them, you know, what emotion do you want to convey with the guitar? You know, well, what do you want to say with it now? What's your kind of, you know, it's not just about the lick that you're playing. You can play it in 30 different ways, but you can voice it differently. And interestingly enough, I as much as I learned some of that from George, it was actually Steve Vai who I learned that more from, because with the just the bulk of instrumental music that he did, he could take a single lick, play it 20 different ways, and make it sound just slightly different every single time, you know, but still keep it dynamic and still keep it really interesting. And you know, and George's stuff, you know, again, it's very vocal. So like Mr. Scary was one of the tracks which was most influential on me when I was learning to play. And I didn't realize till much later that it's a very kind of a vocal track. It's not just shredding for the sake of shredding right the way through. You know, it has a verse, which is like a vocal line, like a harmony vocal line. It's not particularly quick or anything, but then he has the flourishes in between. And I think that's what makes the song fantastic. And it's going along with that, you know, the style of Satriani and Vai and guys like that, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, this kind of segues into something that I pride myself on doing. So, you know, as I said before, you know, I spent a lot of time in shrapnel land, and, you know, I call it shrapnel land, and you know, whatever. I don't mean, you know, I don't mean that it's not a cool thing, because there's a lot of great things that came out of, you know, shrapnel records, but it has a stigma about it, which is that it was all about, you know, mindless squeaking and stuff like that, and there was a lot of that in there, right? So when I refer to that, I'm kind of referring to a time in my playing where I focused a lot on technique, and I developed, you know, very fast picking when I was a teenager. I developed, you know, the ability to tweak and all that stuff when I was a teenager. And this is almost universal for most guitar players. They'll go through this period where they just woodshed and they try to, you know, be as fast as their heroes and all this kind of stuff. And the barrier of entry to get into, say, fast picking is actually not that crazy. It's not that high. You know, getting to that point is just diligence and practice. But what I'm kind of leading to here is that I went through a period as a guitar player where I realized that I had a lot of licks, a lot of technique, but I didn't have anything to say. Or, well, I wasn't saying anything with it. Okay, I had plenty to say, but I wasn't saying anything with it. And then what I ended up doing was, in order to kind of break away from all that, I ended up just starting to go back through old records that, you know, were more vocal harmony, or not harmony, but just like vocal lines and stuff like that. Something that had good vocal melody. And rather than playing any of the guitar parts of any of those records, I would just sit and play along with the vocal lines. So it was all about, you know, getting my guitar to sound as much like the vocal melody that I was hearing. And I started making that a regular exercise for myself. And the net result of that was I kind of started developing more kind of what I do now, which is kind of a mix of a lot of maybe some scalier stuff with some arpeggio stuff, but I try to slow down a little bit. Now, I don't even want to use the word slow down because it's not always slow. You can play a fast vocal line too.
Right.
It's more just the idea of it, where you're trying to say something. And as simple as that sounds, it's really a good example of it. Like and most people hear about this when they learn blues and stuff like that. It's the call and response and all that kind of things, right? You can break it down to call and response, but what it really is if you start thinking like you're talking, you know,
yep.
I'm talking. I'm going to say something right now, and I'm trying to talk. So a lot of times when I post my videos now, you'll see like I'll have a backtrack and I'll post some melodic things that'll have some, you know, fast bits in it too. But when I'm playing the melodic stuff, I'm trying to talk. And the difference of trying to say something when you play, it opens your fingers up to being more or less linear, as you were pointing out earlier, and it becomes more melodic in a sense, almost like a vocal melody.
Right.
And for me, it's the next step of that really is kind of what Satriani did do a lot. And Satriani's made a career out of this, right? He creates a theme. He sets the main theme of what he's trying to say, and then he answers that with something else. But he always goes back to that theme, and similar to a classical fugue,
right?
The theme, and then he'll either add a little bit to it, change it a little bit, phrase it a little bit different. And Vi does it too, like you pointed out when you were talking about Vi. And so it's really like establishing what that is that you're saying, and then going back and hitting it and beating people over the head with it over and over again. I mean, so you're connected. There's a lot of connective tissue in there, right? Which is
right.
You know, some of the runs and some of the connecting arpeggios and things like that. But going back and forth, you're going back into what you're saying, and I might have hammered it once, but the next time I'm bending it up,
right,
holding it, and I'm in a little bit of vibrato on it. And the next time I go in there, I might do a pinch harmonic and bend it up, or I might do a ghost spin and bend it back down. But it's the same melodic structure and theme. And so what I have aspired to in my old age, playing guitar, is
you're not that old, are you?
I've gotten to this point now where I want, you know, that next level to be when I grab the guitar, I'm saying something with it. And there's a lot of tools at your disposal to do that, which accurate, you know, intonation, being able to understand when you're bending a note, bending a pitch, and know that you're bending diatonic, you know, whenever possible, knowing that you're not bending out of key, not bending sharp or flat. Like those are techniques, right? And those are things that you need to master. But the next part is building these phrases and working
definitely
like that.
And part of making it interesting, and this is something which I kind of have figured out over the years, is, you know what, it's the guitar community, the kids who are learning, who want the fast stuff, and that's all fantastic. you know, there's a place for it. It's a really valuable kind of thing to learn, to be able to do that, because, you know, when you put that into a solo, then it just has its own kind of vibe and impact. But for the average listener, it's just too much to digest. There's just too much stimulation, information coming when you're constantly kind of playing quick. So it's using that as the icing on the cake. And I use this analogy a lot with my students, which is, you know, imagine that you're eating a cake where the sponge is this big and the icing's this big, right? You're gonna have a couple bites, and, you know, then it's kind of be a bit sickly sweet, right? So playing too much fast stuff can get that. And, you know, my favorite players and the ones who I often find either on Facebook or YouTube and stuff, ones I gravitate to are the guys who actually just use the fast stuff as the icing and the cherry on top, because then it just has that snap. It just has that impact for that, you know, few seconds, and then they go back to the melodic playing, and you're into the groove of it again. And that's, I guess, that's part of what makes a great song. You know, it's the groove of it. You know, we're not necessarily listening to like if you take a vocal melody for example, it's not necessarily kind of changing right the way through the song, right? It's not like they're gonna completely change the first line to the second line to the third line to the second verse to the third verse. It just doesn't happen. It's quite a regular thing when you break it down. It might be sung a little bit different because of the words and stuff, but the fundamental structure of it stays the same. So why wouldn't you do that with guitar as well? You know, you're telling a story with that, and the more I guess the more you can do that, the more digestible it is for people and
stuff. I recommend any guitar player out there, you know, if you're practicing and you're trying to build, you know, your knowledge of guitar, I would recommend at least spending part of your practice time every day. Pick a song that you like. Like for me, you know, when I was very young, I was growing up on the Corner and Journey, Boston. Like a lot of those bands like that are bands that, like when I was much younger, I was gravitating towards that Rush. I used to listen to my brother brought home moving pictures when I was, you know, a very young lad. And when I first heard YYZ, I was just unbelievably floored, and I was like, "That's cool." I wasn't a guitar player back then. I just heard that music, and it said something.
Right.
Just like, you know, Journey, you know, some of the songs they had really, you know, gravitated. My ear wanted more of that, and so when I heard that stuff, there was like this desire to want to learn more, and I thought it was very cool. It wasn't until my oldest brother came home with, there was like came home with a couple of the records. One of them was Ted Nugent, Intensities and Intensities.
Right.
And the other one, I think, was like Kiss Alive or something like that. When I heard those things, I thought they were bigger than life, and it was just like, wow, that's just cool. And that was the point where I was inquisitive and started thinking about how cool guitar was, and that people that did that stuff were cool. And that was the kind of, I think, those seeds that planted back then in that time with Rush moving pictures and then getting exposed to Ted Nugent stuff. And that wasn't Guitar Hero stuff. And then, you know, when the first Van Halen record came out, that was it, right?
Fine. Change everything.
You know, Eruption and then Running with the Devil, and that was it, you know.
Right.
You know, sign me up. I'm a card-carrying, you know, 6-string axe guy for the rest of my life. You know, just sign me. You know, I'll put my, you know, poke my finger to blood and sign on the dotted line. I'm a guitar player forever. And
now here's an interesting question, which is I'm going to interject here just because I'm curious, because Eddie was obviously kind of like, you know, he made such an enormous impact. When was it that the Bones guitar made an impact on you? Because you obviously kind of do the OG Bones. And I'm curious, you know, when was the first time you kind of really noticed it and thought, oh,
I noticed that guitar for the first time in the 1986 issue of Guitar for the Practicing Musician with a Alone Again transcription. There was a
Right.
photo of George in that magazine holding that Bones guitar. And that was the first time I ever saw it. And I fell in love with it the first time I ever saw it. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And, you know, I remember reading articles like with George, and every now and then, like in the midst of something else in the article, he would say the name J Frog, and like, you know, I'd see the headstock and say J Frog. Who the hell is J Frog? You know, so J Frog for the longest time was this mystery, and
right.
you know, this super cool mystery man that made this guitar. And then, you know, back in that time, there was also Mark Kendall was playing that Shark guitar, which my good friend now owns, John Mancuda. He that guy owns like so many freaking Rockstar guitars, but he recently got the Mark Kendall guitar. Next time I go to,
wow, no kidding.
You watch this, Jonathan. If you watch this video, even if you're watching now or if you watch it later, the next time I come to LA, I'm knocking at the door because I gotta see all your new stuff. So anyway, so going back to that thing, that's kind of what started it for me. And you know, there's probably a lot of videos, out there. I think I might have mentioned this on EVH Gear TV more than once. I don't know, but the whole thing about how I started doing the guitars, because it was, some people know and some people don't know that I've had a very long career in the video game industry, and it goes back to the early '90s when I was making PC games, and I've been an artist in that industry for a very, very, very long time, and part of that.
I tell the truth, you were a gamer, weren't you? You sat in front of the TV for like 17 hours a day, kind of getting repetitive strain on your thumbs.
I was a bona fide card video game, and through middle school and high school and towards my early 20s, I was one of the card carrying super geek out video game fanatic guys, and it
must be so cool to actually go into a career then after that, which was like just centered around something which you were so interested in anyways, Yeah,
when I went to art college, it's very funny because when I was in the entry, they talk to you when you enter the thing, and they ask you what you want to do and all this stuff. And I didn't even take 2 seconds, and I said I want to go work for George Lucas.
Right.
That's what I said when I walked into the school, and they do your entrance, interview and ask you kind of what your goals are and all that stuff. I want to work for George Lucas. So, first job that I got after I graduated was working for George Lucas. So
that's a good job to have, man.
Yeah.
You looking forward to the movie, solo movie?
Which one?
It's out on 25th of May.
Oh, the Solo.
Yeah, Solo.
Solo.
Yeah, about Han Solo.
Yeah, I can do a British accent too. So getting back to that. So my first job in the video game world, I shouldn't say my first job. My first job out of art, college was working for George Lucas, and I was working on Star Wars games.
Wow, cool.
So I did the last level of Rebel Assault 2. I built all of it, and I did all of the cinematic scenes for it for the last level in the game. So I'm responsible for making the TIE Fighter factory and all that shit.
Wow, awesome.
And so I went on to be the lead artist on Rogue Squadron for the N64, and I was lead artist on the Star Wars fighting game for the PS1. So I did a lot of Star Wars games, you know.
That's super cool, man.
Yeah, so you know, getting back to
You are my Star Wars hero now.
back over to the guitar. So I actually know how to do 3D modeling in the computer, so I can, you know, create things in the computer, right? So you know, going back to my young age when I was infatuated with industrial design and taking things apart, like tape recorders and, you know, doing things with them. I was fascinated with that. So when it came time, many years later, I had bought a J Frog Bones guitar from Ed Roman.
Right.
I got it delivered, and I looked at it, and it was the ugliest thing I ever saw in my life.
Oh, jeez. They weren't cheap at the time, right?
It looked like a cartoon monkey, you know, that had been painted by a 5-year-old.
Right.
It was so bad. So I proceeded to strip all the paint off of it, and I wanted to just recarve it. And so I went to the Hard Rock Cafe in LA, and I took pictures of the original, and then went back to recarve it. And the geometry or shape of the J Frog Ed Roman guitar was so far off that I had gotten into it, and I just decided, you know, there's no way I can do this by rebuilding this one. I got to figure out something else.
Right.
So I shelved the idea for several years, and it wasn't until I had, you know, found Christopher Wood's website and wanted to order an Ibanez neck for one of my, you know, guitars that I got into that point where I said, okay, you know, you have a CNC. I believe I can make a 3D model. So why don't I model a skull? So I modeled a skull. And the rest is history. So that's how that whole
Awesome.
started with Chris Woods. But yeah, so the first time I ever saw it was 1986. Guitar for Practice Musician. I still have the issue. I still have the photo, all that good stuff. So yeah.
Fantastic. I saw it like this big. It was like on the cassette tape of Beast from the East, you know, and there it is. There's the body.
You know, this is unbelievable. I would have never thought in 1986 when I saw that picture that one day I would be the guy that makes the exact replica of it.
Right.
But
and having played both of them, the original and your replica of it, and you know, we were there. We had them side by side. It's, you know, people who are watching, it's just incredibly close. They both play similar. They both play just beautifully well. The look is just the amount of detail that Craig's gone into to build these is like, you know, it's absolutely phenomenal. And it was a real honor playing it. You know, the OG as well as the other one, because I played the OG first, right? Came around to you and played the OG. And it was like, wow,
yeah,
this is so cool.
in my hotel room, and I had the, which guitars did I have there? I think I had.
Oh, you had the you know, you just picked up the Malmsteen Strat as well.
I had a Play Loud Malmsteen.
Right.
I had the OG #1 that went to Ricky.
Right, yeah, that's right. Played Ricky's guitar, and that one was in the Breakout video.
Yep. That was in the Breakout KXM video. Yep.
Right, right. And that just played amazingly well, especially the neck. It was just so kind of, I know it was modeled on the original neck, and it just so quick and smooth and stuff. And
George, I remember George playing he played one of the OGs when we were making it, and he actually liked it. I mean, like, not just like, I have to like this because I'm George Lynch and I'm working with Craig on these. No, it wasn't like that. He actually legitimately liked one of them.
Right.
After the setup, and he was like, I think I want to give this one away. I think it might have been Ricky's. I don't remember. I think it was. But yeah, in my hand, I have a very interesting little thing here.
What is that?
So I could make this a very difficult trivia question for people that actually are watching this video, but so anyone that's followed me long enough, and forgive me if if you have been, but you may have saw when I started years ago, I had gone to the art project in Canada. I did a video while I was there pointing out a feature about the Bones guitar when it was in the case in the hard rock. And one of the features was there was a piece of electrical, like some tape that was on the guitar, and you could see it visibly in all the shots that people took of it in the hard rock. Well, what it was is when John Gadesi, back when ESP did that run of 25 Bones guitars, they got the guitar out of the Hard Rock Cafe in Los Angeles for a couple of days, and I believe it was McSwain. It went with McSwain for a day or two, and while it was with Steve McSwain, they were trying to measure it and everything else. But when they reassembled it, John Gadesi is the one that reassembled it, and they sent it back to the Hard Rock.
Right.
He shimmed the Floyd Rose bridge, and these are the exact feeler gauges that he shimmed them with.
Oh, wow.
And so if I'm going to give you the guitar body, they were sitting, and I can put it in the right place here, they were sitting somewhere like this.
Huh.
Okay? And there was a piece of black tape holding them down.
Right.
And so Gadesi had put it there as a shim for when he shipped the guitar.
Right.
And he expected when the Hard Rock Cafe people
You're supposed to take it out, right?
out, and then tighten the strings back or whatever, and they never did. So the guitar sat in from, how much was it, from 1990.
I think it was about 99 they released.
Like 90,
maybe earlier.
95 or something like that. It was around the mid to late 90s. So probably 12 or 13 years or more, it sat in the Hard Rock Cafe.
Right.
These feeler gauges sitting on under the Floyd Rose with a piece of tape open.
You can't make stuff like that up, right?
It's just weird, right? So, I mean, the thing is, when I was trying to recreate the guitar, I was like, I'm going to get everything down, all the way down to the tape on there, And I'm like thinking, okay, this is part of the guitar. I got to make it like with the tape and everything. And I get all the way over, and I'm hanging out with John Gadesi. We were trying to build some of the Bones guitars, OG guitars, and we just get on the conversation. I'm like, hey, dude, when you got the guitar back from the Hard Rock, when George got it back, what did you ever do with those feeler gauges that run to the Floyd? He goes, why you ask? I said, well, because I want them. He goes, I think I have them here. And he's like searching through his drawers, and he's like, oh, yeah, here they are. And he goes, here, take them. So he handed me these feeler gauges. He's probably like, why the hell do you want these feeler gauges? And I'm like, well, but while I was there, I also asked him, I said, what tape were you using? What tape did you put on? So he actually still had a roll of the tape that he used to tape the shims down.
Wow. Is that what you use on the OG then?
And he handed it to me. I don't know if it was the exact spool, but it was the same tape.
The same type, right, of course.
He handed it to me. He goes, well, take this and take the feeler gauges. So, if I ever display my own OG Bones, I'm probably going to be an idiot, and I'm going to like put these feeler gauges under the Floyd.
Yeah, absolutely. With an arrow. You've got to put an arrow. You've got to build an arrow which you attach to the guitar every time you play it, so it points out.
Something like that, yeah. The fun part is I remember having conversations with Chris Woods when we were going to do the 30th anniversary guitar, and all these, oh yeah, Chris, I know it looks like it's this kind of tape, and I think we can buy this tape here, and I'm like talking about what it could be. It's something metal, I don't know. And I was just like trying to figure all this stuff out, and like
so you essentially did with the Bones guitar what I did with Lynch licks, right?
Something like that. I guess that's why.
That's pretty great. It's cool, man. I can understand it. I can get into that headspace. Have
Yeah.
you been there?
It's
The interesting thing about Bones was like I've obviously built my own version of Bones, which is different from the original, which is Spirit Bones.
which, by the way, I'll say two things about that guitar. Number one is I had the honor of playing it, and it plays phenomenally. Number one. Number two, most of the people that are watching this video right now at home, I guarantee you cannot appreciate the detail that you put in that, because when I saw what you did, and I was impressed. I saw the way that you carved the bones, and then on top of that, the fact that you did use wood burning to shade.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's such a unique thing, and it's interesting because you can't see on the video, I know, but there's detail in the carving that just is absolutely cool. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of the best guitars I've ever seen.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And it was, you know, it was for two reasons I did this. Was one, you know, I wanted a Bones guitar, and the second thing was I had a vision of what the Bones guitar was. So for like 20 something odd years or 30 years, whatever it was, in my mind it was always this way. So when I actually created it, that's what it had to be. You know, I couldn't recreate the original Bones guitar. And I'd seen one. I'd seen a copy of the Bones guitar, and it was great. It was like phenomenal to kind of finally kind of hold one. And it was my friend. It was my friend Dan's, and he had it built by somebody, and it was fantastic. You know, but it was just in my mind, actually, the bones need to be round, and, you know, I need to do the vertebrae differently and stuff. So I actually did a video of this earlier this week, you know, because it turned 3 years old. My baby is 3 years old now. So I've shown the detail. So if you guys want, you know, just check out the video on my channel, and you can see kind of, you know, why I spent 50 hours carving this body out. And it was 50 hours.
It looks really good. I mean, I loved, when I first saw it, I thought, okay, well, there's no detail there because I see it only in the video before. And then when I came out to the UK and I actually held it, I was like, damn. Because you did kind of an anatomical treatment to the bones.
Yeah. And that's what it was about for me. You know, it was kind of, you know, that was the obsessive personality thing coming out in me, you know.
That it's to a point where we seem to have gotten with guitar playing and with other things. You kind of have to have that kind of mind. You know, I think you can say that there's something wrong with us, maybe, or whatever, because it's like that.
I say there's something right with us. You know,
some might view it as a character flaw, like maybe your girlfriend or something like that. I don't know, but for me, it's like the way I've always been. You know, I've always been able to hyper focus.
Right.
If I want to do something, you know, I've been able to hyper focus and break everything that I want to do down into these very small, you know, achievable micro goals that get to the bigger goal. And
and that's an important thing to do even if you're kind of, whether you're learning music, whether you're building something like this. It's, you know, this didn't happen overnight. This happened because I learned to do it, you know, and it was kind of the small steps. It's building guitars over many years. You know, the first guitar I built was when I was at school. My graphical communications teacher, my technical drawing teacher, he was a luthier. So when I did my major project in my final year of school, I built a guitar, you know, and that kind of taught me the first stage of it. And then, you know, putting guitars together over the years kind of just taught me and stuff. When I started this, it was literally kind of, right now I've got to learn to carve with a Dremel tool. You know, so yeah, I probably could have got it done quicker if it wasn't maple as well, because I bought a maple body, which is just incredibly difficult to carve and stuff. But I'm glad I did it because I have the skills now to do it, you know, and I can apply it to other things. And those kind of, you know, all of those hours doing it, the small goals, like you said, it essentially built up to, hey, a big goal, which is going to be useful for many things. And definitely this year, because I have a build which I'm going to be doing in the next couple of months, which is really detailed. It's a spirit dance build, which I'll eventually share once the client has the guitar, and that's going to be, you know, super carved. And that
the vlogs.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So yeah, we had a great question on here actually, and I am reading the comments. Hi guys, hey Joe, hey Rick, good to see you guys here. And Cap as well. All right, so Cap had asked, what wood was the original Skull and Bones main body made of? And I shall hand that over to you, Mr. Rundels, to explain.
I'll say this, and I mean no disrespect to the words of George, if you ever see him, you know, don't think I'm dissing you. But so even George doesn't always remember this kind of details, but because I have spent so much time just going down to the minute details of that guitar, I dare say there's probably not a person on the planet that knows the intricacies of that guitar better than I do. Maybe the current person that has it in their possession might, but maybe not. I don't know. Okay, so getting to the answer, and I'm going to beat around the bush too much. So the original body is, in fact,
right.
As far as being very specific to what the body was, unless, you know, if somebody was there the day that Frog started carving on it, I think nobody knows what the exact blank looked like when he started. But having analyzed it as close as I have, I believe, now I'm going off into my own speculation, so the body is definitely mahogany, so that's the answer to the question.
Right.
But what I believe the original body was, I believe the original body could have started as a Telecaster body.
Right.
Mahogany Telecaster body. And I'll tell you a few reasons why I believe that. Okay. First of all, the back of the guitar shows what is a filled cavity. So there was a cavity which was a Telecaster route in that body.
Ah, interesting.
And that route was plugged up with a piece of wood, which is not mahogany. That wood, it looks like, was probably some kind of alder, or it was either alder or maybe maple, but it was plugged up with a different wood. So in addition to that, there, in the Telecaster, you have a kind of a pickup near the neck pocket.
Right.
So there's a route up there. And sometimes it's a swimming pool style kind of thing, and sometimes it's a very accurate route. But I also happen to know, because I have analyzed the neck pocket of the original Bones guitar, that there is the top of the neck pocket, you can see that there has been another filled cavity, which is made of a different wood other than mahogany.
Right.
It leads me to believe that that area was routed out. Additionally, fit a plug, and that plug was put into that area of the neck pocket, and then it was recarved out. And so they basically took a possibly some kind of a router bit, which has a one of those, what do they call them? It's one of those guided router bits, so it kind of has a
right. It has the bearing at the bottom, right?
Yeah, bearing. That's what I mean.
Right.
It has a bearing on it, so they probably rerouted after that the neck pocket using a bearing bit.
Gotcha.
So in that, so if you eyeball the neck pocket, you'll see at the top of the neck pocket that there is in fact a different piece of wood there.
Right.
So, and the route is clearly plugged for a Telecaster route. And on top of that, there was originally a Strat-style flicker bridge on it. And eventually that part was also, part of that area was then also cut away and filled, because around that Floyd route, you can also see some more different piece of wood in there. It's a different style of wood where they plugged that area and sanded it back down. So going back to that, so the body itself started, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I have a lot of reason to believe, a mahogany Telecaster body. And then it was, all the cavities were plugged. And then the wood pieces, which everybody talks about cherry wood being jigged onto that guitar.
Right.
It looks like the whole thing is mahogany based on what I see. The wood that was jigged on looks a lot more like mahogany than cherry wood to me. I'm not going to try to refute Frog or anybody that says it's cherry wood, but my belief is that the skull face, which was jigged on, and the fingers that were jigged on, I have seen them up close. I have seen where the paint is chipped away, and it is, in fact, in my opinion, mahogany. So
I wish I'd known that when I built mine, because it would have saved me a hell of a lot of time carving the damn thing.
maybe, yeah, I guess so.
You know, in another way, you know, maple was the perfect wood because I wanted to burn it. And, you know, it came out looking just incredible like it did. But, you know, when I did my Tiger guitar, you've seen my Tiger guitar, right? The burnt Tiger that I did for the 35 years video.
No, it's all cool. I mean, all this stuff that you do, I think, is amazing.
That took me 2 days to carve from scratch. The whole thing, it was done. It was easy.
My part in the world, so I have a little part in the carved tigers.
Right.
So my part in the carved tigers was, I go to George's house for something completely different.
Right.
And George is like, "Hey man, you want to help me with some of these bodies? Can you help me sand these?" So he hands me ESP tiger bodies and asks me to sand the finish off of them.
Right. Huh. Right. Completely take the finish off?
Yeah. So I'm sitting there thinking, I don't want, it's like, here's this like guitar, like, can I take one home?
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to. If you don't want it, you know.
I'm sitting there, like, orbit sanding all the finish off of this beautiful body. I'm like, fuck, you know, I want one of these myself. And I'm like ripping all the paint off of it. And so yeah, George had a few of those laying around, I guess, and he used like when he first started making those, I think he was making them, you know, with some spare bodies that he had with which had the finish on them. But eventually he started having his own bodies made.
I like where that's evolved to, because the newer ones, the Klondike ones, they're a little bit different. They're not the tiger as such. The striations are different and stuff, and it's kind of his own design rather than kind of the old tiger design. You know, it's evolved into what it became now, which is cool.
I think stuff that George does. I mean, but you know, some of it I like more than others, but I definitely like the snake skin guitars that he does.
Mm-hmm.
I like that
snake hunters,
that Klondike guitar, and you know, I know that he has other people, you know, helping him build some stuff too, but like me, like going back to those guitars that he's doing, I like those. I think they're kind of cool. The Klondike looks really cool.
Right.
I don't know. Since Warren DeMartini, I always thought, I mean, not the graphic snakeskin guitars, but the real snakeskin guitars I thought were really cool. And
yep.
You know, I've seen George, super gluing his fingers together, snakeskin on guitars, but it's very cool. Like the output of that stuff.
If you're there next time he does that, can you kind of video it so that we can Instagram it?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever see that.
You're just standing there like, that's why I play like this.
I'm sure I've done my own handful of things, building guitars too. I mean,
I know. We all have, man. It's one of those things, you know. It's a very hands-on thing, and you just, you know, the number of times I cut myself or, you know, stuck my fingers together, so I can completely relate to it, man.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, it's literally you have to get your hands dirty, as they say.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
all
definitely, dude. Definitely. So, all right, I have another question, and this is going to take us in a different direction. All right, different influences. Not just kind of, I'm not just talking like hard rock influences, but I know personally there's a lot of other styles of music and a lot of other influences which have influenced my personal playing. You know, I'm of Indian descent, so Indian music has kind of worked its way into my playing in a very subtle way and stuff. And I kind of tend to magpie from lots of different things, so it kind of just creates my own vibe, I guess. And this year's been interesting because I'm obviously not doing Lynch licks, and I've been able to explore my style a lot more and actually use that in my videos. So, what other influences have influenced you as a guitar player?
You know, I would have to say, you know, in a roundabout way, that so when I was growing up, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to people, you know, that when I talk on like EBH gear and some other programs, but my father was probably the best musician that I've ever met in my life. I mean,
Right.
So my father comes from the big band era.
Oh, cool.
I mean, he passed away, you know, a while back. He's not with us anymore. I wish he was, because I still would like to pick his brain on some of the stuff that he wrote. But he came from that time. He used to play, you know, if anybody knows jazz that's listening, I mean, he used to play with Stan Kenton and Louis Prima and Nancy Wilson of the jazz world, not Nancy Wilson apart, but in the jazz world. And, you know, I know that he, you know, he eventually gave up music for a long time, but he never stopped. Like, he was such a great horn player. He played piano. If you would close your eyes and listen to my father play piano, you would swear he was a concert pianist. But
wow,
his technique was unorthodox. He never played like traditional finger style. He would use 3 fingers sometimes, and he was more like a parlor piano kind of guy, you know, just he was doing these like rolling arpeggios. I mean, he could play rolling arpeggios like all up and down the piano, like just in like this cascade of arpeggio notes, you know, coming out of the piano, and just beautiful music. And so I'll tell you like a story, right? You know, there was a time where I was learning some Yngwie stuff. Okay, I had put on the Rising Force album, and it was Far Beyond the Sun that came on. My father picked up the clarinet, and he played Far Beyond the Sun. He played the main theme, and,
wow.
he was like playing up and down harmonic minor on the freaking clarinet and ripping away. It's like he only heard it once.
Wow, that's cool, man.
He just started playing it, and that just goes to say, he was the big. My father was. He just improvised, because that's the way they played back then. You start playing a riff or some kind of a, you know, some vamp or something, and those guys would just go at it, and they would scat with their,
right.
And they would just they'd play around the melody and just start scatting on the instrument, right? And so listening to him play, it was an unbelievable. Like, I looked at that and I go, how am I ever going to be able to do that? How am I ever going to get to that point where I can play organically over music? And so getting back to, I mean, the obvious thing is, my father believed in me. He supported my music, and he was an example of what happens when you put a lot of effort into playing an instrument. So
Right.
I would say that, you know, transcending kind of beyond the obvious, you know, music influences, like my first musical influence would have to be my father, for sure.
Awesome.
And, you know, going back into the rock realm, I guess, you know, I like I said, you know, I like Tom Schultz is one of those people that, like, some people just hate him. They hate his playing and stuff, you know. I used to love Tom Schultz playing. You know, Tom Schultz, like, he knew how to play a freaking, like, line that you would remember later. You know, it's
Right.
like you can't forget those vocal-esque melody lines that guy played. And when I read about how he was making his own effects, you know, like he was like this genius that's making all of his processing for his guitars, I was just like, what? You know, like crazy. And so, you know, going back, you know, listening to some of that Boston stuff was really big, like as far as influential on what I would end up doing.
Right.
I don't know.
It's interesting how that happens as well, because you know, music when we listen to when we're children, even if it's kind of in the background, it has an effect on us as musicians eventually. Because, you know, I don't listen to Indian music. I got to a stage where, you know, well, when I was growing up, I should start by saying when I was growing up, there were like Indian movies playing at home. You know, I used to watch them and enjoy them and stuff. And but I got to a stage where, you know, I wanted to be a rock musician, so I left all of that behind. But interestingly enough, as I progressed as a musician, you know, the sounds that I heard even back then started to kind of veer into my playing, especially when I heard like rock players use it in the context of their songs. So when I heard like the melodic minor scale being played by somebody like Warren DeMartini or George, for that matter, they both kind of use it in a subtle way. It really resonated, and I think that's what actually, you know, started to create that interest for me in exploring all of that. And it's just wonderful how that happens, because those early influences are so strong, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I would just as much put guys, even if they're not guitar heroes, like Mick Jones, you know,
Right.
Foreigner. You go back to that, you know, songwriting genius, right? Beautiful, you know, weaving melodies and songwriting genius, that guy. You know?
Which is a massive part of it, because although we want to be kind of, you know, shreddy guitar players, when you're in a band context, you know, that's 30 seconds of the song. The rest of the time, you got to make something interesting off the rhythm as well, you know.
Yeah.
And you got to make it vocal, whatever you do, you know. There's making that short amount of time count as a solo is great and all, but the rest of the song has to also have that catchy quality. And that was the genius, I think, of like the 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, just the songwriting was just so potent. It was, you've got melodies which, you know, even kids now remember. It's played on the radio even now, you know.
Yeah. You know, I mean, going back, you know, I also used to listen to, you know, stuff like Michael Jackson and, you know, things like that. You know, he had some heavier stuff too that he came out with as well. I mean, there's pop music to me that also kind of outside of like the rock thing that I think is not like something that I sat and learned everything about, but I'm, you know, as part of what I listened to growing up, you know, that I liked, you know, somehow seeps into what I think, you know,
right.
And to me, you know, that you look back at those guys that are songwriting geniuses, and yes, the song stuff. I look at my guitar learning experience and all that stuff in different ways. There's the technical part, right? And you can chalk up the technical part where you could talk about all the Nunos and the Ingves and Steve Vais and the Jason Becker and all that stuff. And, that's, to me, that's like, a lot of that was like the technique part, right? Then there's all this other stuff that kind of flows in, you know. Yngwie turned me on to wanting to hear more, classical stuff. So I learned a lot of that stuff, and when I heard McAlpine playing Chopin and all that kind of stuff, you start listening to those things too, right?
Right.
You go, okay, well, what is it about this, And then you start learning the cycle of fifths and go, okay, well, this is really interesting. So you talk about the classical music, and then these guys are using these kind of, progressions. And now I know why that harmonic minor scale works now, because it's because of this kind of major alteration chord thrown in the middle of this minor progression thing, and that's why that raised seventh is in there, and that's why it sounds like this. And you start locking in all that kind of music stuff into all these different things. So, like, influences, like, to me, like, you have the song writing influences, which are like those, you go back to those, guys that write really beautiful songs and have like this, I'm going to say the arrangement of that kind of music, that pop type music or cultural, like popular music. And you realize it's the simplicity, like we talked about earlier. It kind of all rolls back to this thing where what we tend to gravitate toward when we check our brain at the door, as they say, and we listen and to experience music, we have to, it's almost like it has to be accessible.
Right.
Be accessible, even if it's technical music. In that technical music that's accessible, you'll find that simplicity part. And even if you have something, you can take even Baroque stuff, right? And it's crazy frenetic music, but find in there a theme. Like if you listen to like an old fugue or something, there's a theme, and break that theme down to simplicity, like a simple phrase. No matter how crazy it gets off the rails later, as it can evolve through the piece, you can really draw it back down to this one little chunk, which is that nucleus, which is that simplicity, accessible part.
Right.
And that to me, when you go back to the song, that's when I'm not trying to like do a song that teaches how to sweep pick or something. I want to go through and try to look at that as an underpinning, right?
Right.
So yeah, kind of going off on a tangent there, but for the most part, like I said, influences, like you said, my father, number one. On the songwriting side, it's
What's the first album you remember listening to?
First album, I can tell you the first album I ever bought.
Cool.
First album I bought that was mine, that I actually took my money, my allowance, and bought was Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Oh wow, cool! I bought that a year ago, I think. The original '77 pressing, or whatever year it was. I have a copy of that now. I actually have a couple of records here. They're not Pink Floyd records.
Oh yeah, vinyl.
Yeah, vinyls. I bought these two last year. They weren't cheap. They were hard to find, and they weren't cheap. But
Rising Forward and Marching Out on vinyl.
Wow, cool. But it's The Wall is just a phenomenal album.
Yeah.
So
even when I was very, very young, this is before. How old was I? I had to have been 7 or 8 years old or so.
Right.
That music fascinated me. So I also used to listen to Elton John.
Yeah, he was just fantastic.
So like going back to my young age, I mean I can tell you, and it's going to sound kind of funny, but this also has an influence on me. My parents used to listen to the Carpenters.
Right.
The Carpenters, that music, it's some freaking well done songs and very melodic music.
And I totally hear it in your playing.
And no, yeah, no, but seriously, like I remember.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because it's that influence of having that Indian music kind of playing in the background. The interesting point for me was kind of like, for many years I actively tried to stay away from it. It was like, I don't want to do that at all. But when it actually kind of, when that bug grabbed me, it was really strong and it was very instinctive. So when I ran with it, it doesn't feel like I'm kind of trying to play it or trying to make it sound a certain way. It just, that influence is just there. I'm aware of what it should sound like, so I can kind of just go off and recreate the vibe rather than playing just the straight classical lines, which Indian music is actually quite technically challenging in terms of just the structure. It has to be, the rags have to be done in a certain way at a certain time in certain situations, etc., etc. Interesting enough, but I actually got into guitar music, especially music in general, because of soundtracks. And that was kind of massively influential on me. First one I remember, which I have on vinyl now as well. I bought it not too long ago, actually. Was War of the Worlds. I remember listening to that through headphones at school. Yeah, and that was cool. And then it was Miami Vice soundtrack. Just awesome.
Was that
Top Gun? Say again?
Is that Harold Faltermeyer stuff?
No, that was Top Gun. I listened to that as well. That was hugely influential on me. That great songs on there. Yeah, that was Top Gun, right? No, Miami Vice was Jan Hammer.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was like that very staccato-y kind of delay.
And it was all done on a guitar. He was a keyboard player, so it wasn't even a guitar at the time. But he was phenomenal, just incredible musician. And the soundtracks they used to have, that was all pop songs, rock songs, 80s stuff, and
I almost forgot, and it's terrible that I haven't remembered this when we were talking about influences and music that resonated with me in my teens. When I was getting into guitar, because it's not something that comes out a lot in my playing, but it's huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's John Sykes.
Oh, right, cool.
Like listening to early Whitesnake stuff and listening to the Thin Lizzy stuff. I mean, Sykes is one of those guys that you talk about again in a similar way, where grabbing the guitar by the nuts kind of thing. It's like this thing, that like when I see a guitar player and play the guitar, I don't want to see him just noodle and play it. I want to see him freaking manhandle the thing.
Right.
I want to see, if I'm not hearing the creaking of the neck moving in the pocket vibrato, then it's like, they got to pull more on the strings, right? So it's like there's like this power that comes like with Sykes or even with Lynch. Like you see, there's something to be said, for a long time playing the guitar, I was always told, play with light touch, and play fast. You play with a light touch and all this shit. And you know what? I'm gonna just bust that thing right now. Okay, I'm gonna explain something that's really important, because anybody that I don't want anybody to waste their guitar playing career not knowing this little intricacy.
Right.
Is first of all, good vibrato and good string bending comes with power. If you want when you go to do vibrato or go to bend a string, you must have strength and power in it. Otherwise, it's not going to have that grab by the nuts kind of feel. Like if you like players like Rammstein and Lynch and Sykes and that, I mean, those guys are manhandling the strings.
Right.
And the other thing is, you know, you look at guys with the best hammer-on technique, and their fingers are banging the strings like a typewriter.
Absolutely, yeah. That's it. That's an interesting one because I kind of, when I teach hammer-on pull-off stuff, that's essentially what I do. I turn off my guitar volume and say, well, listen to how hard my fingers are actually hitting the fretboard. You know, and it's something which I learned from these guys.
Yeah, and it's, if you want to practice, like I recommend practice, like I'm gonna just hold the guitar right now. I'm not really gonna turn the volume up, but if you want to like get that vibe going, I like even hammer slightly the first finger.
Right.
You want it to sound like, even if you have to like, you know, play the guitar like this, you know, you want to hear even the sound of this first finger hitting the string. Because if you hear that when you practice this this legato, your fingers are going to get more powerful, and they're going to, all of your notes, even when you're picking, are going to sound clearer.
Right. And it's kind of like weight training for your fingers, right?
Yeah. So
it's essentially going to the, you know, your fingers are going to the gym, essentially.
If you hear guys, like, there's guys out there that play, I don't remember his name, God, and I apologize if I don't remember this guy's name, but he's like he's a British guy. It's like a weightlifter, guitar player, British guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got his name now. Crazy technique. I mean, I'm not sure about like how he plays musically necessarily, but he has like the most incredible technique. And he teaches this hammer-on style that's very staccato, and he mutes the strings while he does it. And he's an incredible example of this, where he's got so much power in his fingers that he plays fast, but everything pops.
It's just been posted on there. Rick Graham. Thank you, dude.
Yes. So
Thanks for letting us know.
Rick Graham. So you want to look at power players, right? Panos Arvanitis.
Yeah.
Rick Graham. Like those guys have impeccable strength in their hands, and and I will say, you know, if Ingve sees this, he'll probably hate me, but I'm gonna just say it. I mean, Panos plays Ingve better than Ingve, and this is a truth, right? Because he has that spark and fire that Malmsteen had when he was like 19 years old.
Right.
And he has it, and when he plays, he has feeling and emotion, and and again, Panos grabs the string like he means it every time, and very melodic player. If you haven't seen him, you definitely need to see him. He's like an incredible guitar player.
I guess actually, a thought just occurred to me, because obviously these guys have been doing music for like 30 years, you know, like George and Malmsteen and guys like that. They've been out there 30, 35 years, constantly kind of doing their thing. I guess at some point they must get to a point where they're just on autopilot. They're just kind of going through the motions of doing it. So maybe some of the spark that was there initially kind of just wanes away, you know?
And I would say 100% that's true. And then, but I will also say this. I think when George goes in the studio with Ray and Doug for KXM,
yeah,
I think he goes back with that spark.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of that has to do with just progressing as a player and doing something different each time. And I know George is very much like that. You know, he doesn't want to be in the same place as he is in right now next year. It has to be a progression.
I have a little story about that.
Right.
Tangible story. So that time that George and I were working on the video game project, we went to record some stuff. And we went to Bob Kulick's studio. So Bruce Kulick's brother, Bob Kulick, by the way, he I believe played on Kiss Alive 2. And I know that he toured with Meatloaf during the Bad Island Hill tour. But Bob Kulick, now he has a recording studio. So George and I went there and took his Soldano.
Right.
I think it was the original Soldano. And we went there to record some stuff for this video game project. And the story isn't about the Soldano, but there is a story in this about the Soldano. The story actually goes to when we were doing solos for the song, and I had George working on doing the solos. So I was the producer, and George was doing guitar solos, which is very strange for me because
Awesome.
I'm sitting in a room like going, "No, try this," or let's do it. And George was doing his thing, and it was a very surreal experience for me, right? So I actually have video of it, which I don't post because I don't want to get George pissed off at me for posting something like that. But I have video of this session where we were doing this. But so I'm going back. George is doing takes on top of the rhythm track, and I'm like, no. I mean, that was cool, but that's not what. That's like now, George. I want '80s George.
Right.
The song needs '80s George. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, he goes, what do you mean '80s George? I mean, I don't play like that anymore. It's like, no, you got to play like that. Just go back to the Dokken days and play '80s George. And I remember we were joking, and we were bantering back and forth and kind of teasing George, and we basically said, no, George, you are the '80s, man. Come on, you are the '80s. And he just looked at us like we were like insulting him or something. But sure enough, George broke back into '80s George, and he basically did a solo that he would have done off of like Under Lock and Key or Back at the Attack.
Oh, cool, man.
And I was like, that's it. That was perfect. We don't need to do any more takes. I mean, so the funny part was the stuff that he was playing first was fucking amazing. It was absolutely freaking amazing. But the game that I was doing was based on '80s hairband days. So I wanted that vibe in the song.
Right.
Stuff that George was playing at first, it wasn't bad. It was fucking amazing. He was doing these like crazy, multi-cross string arpeggio stuff with some string skipping. And it was just like stuff that I've never seen him do before. He was just like having fun with it. He was all over the place with it. Like, it sounded so amazing. Like, but that's too technical. It sounds too modern. It needs to be more '80s.
Right.
More '80s. Like, well, you're the '80s. Come on, just be George. And so he did the next couple takes, and we kind of merged them together, and it ended up being like, the George
cool.
that you knew from those days.
You know, one of my favorite George solos ever, and this is kind of singing my own praises a little bit, but it's the solo that he did for my song, When Angels Cry. And that solo just kind of epitomizes what George's style is. It was just such a perfect, beautiful flow, and I remember getting it, I wake up in the morning and, there's an email from Brett Chasen, who was the engineer at the time. And, I download these files, that little kid again is like, oh my God, just received a George Lynch solo. Drop it into the session, and it was just perfect. And I'd heard him play on other tracks, do guest spots. And when I was writing Circle of Fire, there were a bunch of songs which were Dokken-esque. And, I had a choice of like 12 songs to send him, it could have been any one of those he soloed on. I picked the one that was the most different because I knew that would challenge him, and he'd kind of like just be in his element with it. and I got it back, and it was just a magic moment where I was like, that is absolutely perfect. That solo was just written for this song. It just didn't have to screw with it, didn't have to EQ it, just some delay, reverb, and that's it. Just fit. It was supposed to be there.
No, I think it's hard to get something bad from him.
Right.
I just can't see it.
I don't think it's bad in any sense that he would do anything, because obviously as a professional musician, and I can relate to this, whenever I send something out now, I have to be 100% happy with it before whoever I'm sending it to hears it. I guess sometimes what can happen, and I've heard, I know this has happened to George a couple of times when he's played on other people's tracks. He's doing his thing, but it doesn't necessarily fit the music which is written. Yeah. And I think there's this perception that, if you send George a song which is kind of Dokken-esque, then he's going to play like Dokken. Well, he would have played like Dokken if it was 1988, but otherwise, left to his own devices, he's going to play in a different way now. And I think that was always the genius of what you did, which was actually you were producing it. You were there to say to him, all right, do something which is Dokken-esque now,
Yeah.
And that guidance actually gave him that impetus to actually create that awesome solo.
I mean, I basically told him stuff like, just to give more context to it. What I kind of told him was, just hang on notes longer, do more, just give more juice to the notes with that vibrato of yours. I told him, I said, simplify the melody a little bit more, and just sit into the notes more and that kind of thing. And basically what I was articulating was more staying away from the busy part and being less busy, and using some of his traditional kind of bends and that wide vibrato with this semi pinch harmonic kind of things, which is another thing. It's what I like that you hear in George's playing is like with their finger, like, and this thing because you do his style, but there's this thing that he does when he gets a note a certain way, and it's not like a pinch harmonic per se.
Right. It's a semi-harmonic. It's just a tiny little touch.
The semi-harmonic that goes in there, and it's like an overtone on the note, and you hear it, and it's that Lynch sound kind of thing, right?
Right.
You hear it. But those are the kind of magical things that come out of his playing, and it's those things I was trying to articulate when I was in the studio.
Right, right. Do you find that for yourself? Because I know when I write music now that I'm very, very conscious of creating that vibe and creating that that flow, which works well, rather than overplaying. I think that's come a lot from working on instrumental music. And when I did the Inner Road album, Ascension, just months of actually recording instrumental stuff kind of gave me that that insight into how to keep it interesting as an instrumental, but without overdoing it. Because if you show all of your licks on the first song, then that's it. You got to learn some more licks for the next one, right?
Yeah.
So I think kind of I'm very conscious of it, that you've got to kind of create a flow in what you do, rather than kind of just go off and show off all your licks and stuff.
Yeah, I think the old me was more noodly.
Right.
But as you evolve as a player, you start thinking about those things, and a lot of what I like, having been an art director in the game industry for many years, and looking at things not only from a musical standpoint but from a pure art standpoint, right? And we all know that there's parallels in music and traditional art and everything else. And being in both of those worlds, right, I kind of see what those things are. And a lot of it comes down to contrast. And when we look at images or we listen to music, the way what elicits a response from our emotion, or when we see or hear something, it's the relationship of what has preceded what we're experiencing now. And in this vein, how you think about when you write a song or how you're playing a solo or anything like that, if everything stays the same, then there's nothing to reference it to.
Right.
So it eliminates this contrast without any separation or great distance between the delta between that which we perceived or heard, or that which we are hearing now, and that which we will hear next. If the delta between those points is not significant enough, then it doesn't, we orally or we don't, emotionally don't respond as much. Right? Sometimes our mind needs to be woken up. And
right.
The thing is, if I'm sitting in the house and I hear a loud noise, if I sit in the house and I hear a clock ticking, I can fall asleep. But if I sit in there and I hear a loud noise, then all of a sudden I'm like, what the
yeah.
And it's the same thing. So music, I say that you can find that delta of contrast in many different ways. In music, it can be, you know, how loud or soft something is.
Right.
It can be the distance between an interval, like this note and the next note, right? It can be, I guess,
you know, one of the examples that I give, but this is really, it's such an interesting point. And one of the examples I give is often what I hear is, if there's a busy rhythm, then simplify the lead in front of it if you're doing an instrumental.
Yep.
Because then you're creating a contrast, a real contrast. If the backing is simple, then you can busy up the lead, because it's not going to fight with each other. You're not kind of, you know, it's not like having a blank canvas, putting your brush into, you know, the white paint and painting it across. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of contrast, but if you stick that same brush in the red paint and stroke it across that canvas, you know, it's going to have much more impact.
So, you know, I break it down, you know, if you break it down to the lowest common denominator, it's the delta between what you are experiencing and that which preceded it.
Right.
And if, so going back to that, I mean, I'll give you like a contrast example, which I thought was really cool, was Metallica's, what was it? I think it was the Unforgiven.
Right.
So typically in Western music, the verses are soft and the choruses are loud.
Right. They reverse that.
In this song, they purposely do that. So the verses are and then it's like very like it comes down like during the chorus, it starts getting mellowed out, and that's a contrast. It's not only is it a contrast, but it's a contrast that is different than the way we normally hear it.
Right.
And so you talk about stuff like that and how you're doing arranging of music. To me, it's, you know, whenever, I don't care how, if you've been playing guitar for 5 days or 40 years, okay? If you want to play something interesting, break down to that basic construct of, I need to create contrast in what I'm playing. Mm-hmm. I need to juxtapose something over something else, like you said. If I'm doing something busy in the background, I need something simple in the foreground. If I play something soft, I need to punch something louder, or I need to, if I'm playing something slow, play something fast, beat it up. Right. It's like a roller coaster, right?
Exactly. It's the ebb and flow, right?
then I'm not going to enjoy that ride at all, right? But
Right.
if now all of a sudden the roller coaster is more fun. You add a loop, it's even more fun.
Exactly.
A bank, and it's even more fun.
Right.
So then you add a looped bank with the hill after. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's again, you're speeding up, slowing down, turning left, turning right.
Yeah.
It needs to be like that.
Totally.
And that's a very simple, maybe abstract association, but it's very much, I think, the way.
Right. And it's interesting you should mention the spin around of the verse and the chorus thing. You know, the first song that I consciously became aware of that on was Tangled in the Web.
Mm.
George did the same thing. It was kind of a heavy verse section, dan, 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 very staccato, and then going into this chorus, which was very flowy and clean guitars, you know, and just letting that carry the song. It was just, theoretically it should have been the other way around, right? But it just worked so well. And you're right, you know, it's about creating that vibe of a roller coaster for the listener as well, because then you're taking them on a journey, you know. And I think that is just an incredible thing. It's a gift that we can give to people who listen to music, right? Because then they actually experience something while they're listening, rather than just being the observer of it. Just basically kind of, you know, yeah, that's great, cool. Next song, please.
I'm not boring all the people with philosophical shit, but to me,
they're loving it. I've just had a comment on here. Hi, Mark. How you doing? It's good to have you here. He said, "Hi, Jay. This is very interesting. Yeah, the art of contrast, very important for a musician. I can relate." So, hey, you know, these guys are loving it. So,
yeah,
be as philosophical as you want to.
No, sometimes people just want. You just play your noodly shit, you know. It's like,
screw that, man. We don't do that. We don't do that here.
No, I mean, I'll tell you what, you know, one of the guys, I mean, just breaking a little bit off the topic, but on this topic to a certain degree, is I had the pleasure of listening to some Jason Becker's tracks off his new album.
Right.
And, you know, I have to say, you know, one of the most incredible people on the planet right now, for many reasons, is that guy. You know, Jason. He's brilliant in his own kind of way, right? What he does. The fact that he has this, he feels like he has a message to tell.
Right.
Like he feels that he has something that's there, that's inside him, that he has to get out. And he found a way to do it. And you know, sitting down a few months ago with Dan and Jason, they let me listen to a lot of the solos. Or there's this really cool song on the new Jason Becker album. It's a very I'm gonna say Spanish style. Mm-hmm. So it's like this flamenco kind of track, you know, and then he's got like all these like guitar players soloing over it. So they basically have, I forget how many bars it was. They were a significant amount of soloing for each one of the guys, and there's some amazing stuff there. I mean, hearing some of these guitar guys playing that we know as the shredders of today, or whatever you want to call them, and the shredders of yesterday, whatever you want to call them, right. They're soloing over this flamenco track, and it sounds freaking incredible. Like, I don't know how many people that are watching follow Jason or know of Jason. A lot of people probably do, but I have this feeling that there's going to be some stuff on this album that most people that play guitar are going to be extremely fascinated by it. Right. What I heard was incredible. I've heard like several tracks off of the new album, and it's just, you got Jason's, musical mind and what he's thinking, and Dan is producing it. Basically, what Dan's working on, Dan Alvarez, he's doing a phenomenal job. And I just want to mention this because we talk about arranging, we're talking about contrasts and all this stuff with writing and music, and I think what Jason has done on this album, it's literally, you talk about, it's his opus,
right?
And it's going to be one of those things that it's going to go down as one of the most probably influential albums for a lot of people. Like, I think people are going to get inspired by this. I really do.
Interesting word you just used, and I just saw it pop up on the messaging as well. And something I was thinking about is just the sheer inspiration which he has imparted on people by carrying on. In the face of whatever adversity, he's still making music and creating and doing just an incredible job of it. I think that's, well, you know me, you know me very well, and you know how important inspiration as a general concept of life, of living life, is. So that aspect of it is equally important to me, and I can imagine that when that comes out, that's going to be kind of like just a light bulb moment for a lot of people.
No, I can tell you, I've spent a fair amount of time with Jason now, over the last few years, and pretty much every time I go to the Bay Area, I try to drop in and spend time with him. And one thing that is abundantly clear when I'm with him is that guy has so much heart, soul, and passion. As a guy that plays guitar, I'd say when I play something that I'm proud of, it usually is because it comes from here. It's like it comes from a passion. Like,
right.
I really honestly feel what I'm playing and emoting. And those are the magical moments, right? When I am sitting there with Jason and having conversations through interpretation, but yet having conversations and listening to what he's doing, hearing the way he talks about music, the way he thinks about it, the way he thinks about what he's doing, it comes across with an immense amount of passion.
Right.
And when I look at the music that's coming out of his work with Dan, it's basically it's Jason's hands, basically. Dan's a smart guy and he's a very talented producer, but he's able to work with Jason and able to take that passion and that soul of Jason and work with it and get it out, into something that we can experience. And I would just say that, in conjunction with the guys that come in and do guest spots and stuff, when they're doing guest spots, there's that underpinning is there, that melody, that harmony, all those components are coming from his soul. They're there.
Right.
And that guy, I have to tell you, he's a brother from another mother, basically, as far as I'm concerned. We were born the same year. We basically liked the same movies.
Cool.
Grew up loving the guitar. We actually had conversations about this, and I was just fascinated that we basically grew up the same way.
Right.
Into Star Wars, into Jaws.
Star Wars is awesome. Jaws is awesome as well.
Jaws had the acting in Jaws and the movie Jaws had a big inspiration on us, and we both studied sharks after that. We both, picked up the guitar and got into the guitar, and he got into it obviously better than I did and younger than I did. But beside that point, at least we went on a similar.
Right.
But no, there's a lot of connection that I felt with him, and when I talk to him, I see what he's doing. It really touches my soul, and I think
that drives people as well, especially musicians. I know it does with me, because when I feel inspired to do something, I'm not. What comes out, what results, is just phenomenal. And I think, for me personally, this year has been very open for that. And it's been interesting hearing from various people just who've seen just how my progression has come this year, because I'm doing my own thing, which means, you know, I'm always in here with a huge smile on my face. And so the only thing that can happen is all of that inspiration and passion pours out into every single thing I'm working on, every single note that I play. And it's a wonderful place to be. And I can imagine these guys going in to record the solos for Jason. First of all, they're looking at this guy who was an inspiration anyway back in the day. He's become an enormous inspiration for different reasons now. And when they step in, I can just imagine they're so kind of just, that tingle's going down their spine, and they're thinking, wow, I'm going to be recording for Jason Becker now.
Yeah.
And so that passion just pours out into every single solo that's done for that album.
And I think that's very true. And going back to what you said about you, I knew about you a long time before I had, wrote you, just to chat.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I thought, I felt the need that you and I needed to just touch base, not only because we have a connection through this Lynch world kind of thing in a way, it was because of your enthusiasm.
Right.
You have an infectious enthusiasm about you that comes across in your videos and what you can do. And I simply felt like that was the kind of vibe I wanted around me.
Right.
That was I guess my whole catalyst for saying, okay, well, we're kind of tied up in this world with George Lynch and all this stuff. I should reach out to Jay and we should connect, because he seems like a guy that has that mind that I like, which is somebody that exudes passion.
Right. And then it panned out, actually. I remember the first conversation we had. It went on for like 2.5 hours or something.
Yeah.
It was just natural. It flowed. And guys who are watching this is essentially why we did this. You being voyeurs in our conversation, because this is what happens every time we hook up. We're kind of just talking for hours and stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Share with you.
It's very interesting, but this is very true. Like, our first conversation was a couple hours long.
Right.
We don't talk often, but when we do talk, we usually have these conversations and we get into about each other, about different things that we're experiencing. And the last time we did this, which was recently, I remember we just had these, we were talking about all this stuff,
Right.
And sometime at the end of things, Jay, we probably should.
Yeah, it was your idea. You said,
live thing.
Let's do a live stream, man. Let's do it.
Let's banter for an hour or two. But that was the whole catalyst of going and doing a live thing, was just, we just tend to talk like this when we get together and chat. We just end up talking like this. And there's a lot of things that seem, at least they're interesting to me. I don't know if they're interesting to anybody else, but for me, it's interesting to talk about this stuff because it's kind of my world.
Definitely. I'm still here.
Exactly.
Everyone else is like, oh man, philosophy. They're teaching us philosophy. We just want to see them playing guitar, damn it.
Yeah, want to see some licks, man.
Yeah. Let me see that tiger guitar, damn it.
I would be happy to play some licks if I thought that this program could handle it.
Now, you know what? They've seen us play. I mean, they can check out our videos.
Not exactly
and stuff,
the best way to make an oral
experience. Right. Absolutely. We'll reserve that for later.
It's like when your friend calls you with a shitty cell phone and says, listen to this new rip that I wrote. And it sounds like... especially because they got the Marshall on,
7 or 8. Like, check it out.
They turn it up and it's like, it's like, did you
What
hear
do you think of it?
it's like, well, I heard 2 notes. The first one you played and the last one. Those 2 notes sounded good.
Yeah, that was great, man. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, well, let's do something with it.
Yeah, Eric Broadbent, I guess, has the shit down. I mean,
he does. He's got the setup so well done. Eric,
he
I know
does that.
you're watching.
They actually
awesome.
play on the video, and it actually works.
Yeah, just incredible how he does that. He gets that sound so good over like a streaming connection. So yeah, kudos, man.
Yeah, so whatever you did, Eric, I guess we should maybe one of these days try to figure out how to make that universal.
What he's saying, Eric, is we're going to steal your setup so that we can sound as good as you do when we do our videos next time.
Yeah.
Borrow.
Yeah.
Hey, he's inspiring us to do this, right? I mean, we've been watching his show and kind of, different other talk shows on like YouTube for a while, and I guess this isn't a talk show. This is more just a conversation between us.
This is very much not a talk show. I want to leave that to the professionals, but
yeah, definitely, yeah. We can't do a talk show, guys. Can answer some of your questions, but
yeah,
talk show.
If you want to listen to 2, guitar players banter about nonsense here and there.
We should have done this from NAMM, Maybe we should do it from NAMM next time. That'd be cool, from the Shaggy one.
Yeah, Jaguar. Yeah, that's right. A Jag. It wasn't the most fancy Jaguar, by the way, but it was a Jaguar.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. All right, we should wrap this up because we have been online for like 2 hours and almost 20 minutes. And just want to say a huge thank you for all of you guys who watched today. We're going to kind of just impromptu do this once in a while and, just have a conversation and stuff. And talk about some interesting stuff. Maybe we'll kind of ask you guys next time if you want us to talk about anything specific. So have an awesome day, and we shall see you guys again soon. And Craig, it's just awesome chatting as always.
It's always great talking with you, Jay. So, and to everyone that did decide to not fall asleep during this long conversation,
we shall try and do better next time to make you fall asleep, right?
We'll try better next time. We'll give you some home remedy pills to take. In all seriousness, thanks for hanging out with us, and I hope that those of you that didn't fall asleep did enjoy it. So, and like I said, as always, pleasure talking, Jay. So
cool. All right, guys, we shall see you again soon. Later. Bye.
Later.